Good morning, YouTube. This is GW Guns here. I did a previous video on an Ithaca, which 900 series, I'm sorry, which got a lot of people asking me questions and asked me for information and this stuff. So I have another one in here that has feeding problems, it has discharge problems, or ejection problems, I should say. So I'm going to take a minute here and just kind of run through how this thing actually works, and hopefully give you guys a couple steps out there that if yours doesn't work, you can at least narrow it down to why it's not doing what it's doing, because it gets extremely confusing when it's just not working and you don't know how it's supposed to work. So the first thing I want to do, my other video, when I disassembled the customer gun that was sent in, we have our recoil spring, we have our friction ring, and we have our other steel piece. Okay, I said it didn't matter how this went, which confused some people. What I meant was, don't be so concerned about how this metal ring goes. It's tapered on one side, as you can see, it's flat on the other. Okay, so when you assemble this metal ring goes against the spring. The gun that was sent me was put together backwards. I didn't notice it because I was focused on other things when I tore it apart, and I did it kind of quick. Friction ring, there's a couple different styles. You'll see on this one it's got a metal band on it and it's serrated on the inside. The other one was just a solid brass ring. It's just they changed it over the years. You know, whatever you have, it really doesn't matter. So this always goes against the spring. Your friction ring, which this one is really tight, goes on next, and then of course your barrel, which sits against here. The reason they say light loads and heavy loads, if the taper is against the collar, when the spring tension pushes on it, it's going to squeeze the collar, it's going to slow down the action and put more friction on the tube. If the metal ring is spun the other way, it's flat against here and it puts less tension on it. One is for light loads, one's for heavy loads. Basically what it does is kind of set the timing on this. When you get this much wear on a gun, and a gun is this old, it doesn't have as drastic a difference as it did when it was brand new. That's why I say don't really pay attention to light load, heavy load. If it's not cycling right, it's not working right, just turn that metal ring over and see if it gets better. If it does, that's where you need it for that particular shell. If you're shooting light bird loads, it should be one way. If you're shooting heavy buckshot or turkey loads or something, it should be the other. But I said it doesn't matter how it goes. It really doesn't. Put it on one way. If you have cycling problems with it, flip it over, see if it takes care of it. If it does, you're good to go. If it doesn't, we have another issue. And that's where we're going to go with this. But I wanted to clear that up because I got a lot of feedback on that. And I really expected to have a gunsmith chime in and say, "You got it wrong, idiot," but nobody did, so I appreciate that. So moving on, we're going to go through some of the pieces and parts here and try to explain to you how this actually works and how it cycles. Because like I said in the other video, this and the French, you work 100% backwards of a normal shotgun where everything works coming backwards. Everything on this gun pretty much works going forward. So I'm going to try and show you, and I apologize for not having a cameraman, and this frustrates me making it. I'm sure it'll frustrate you watching it. We have two things in here. We've got this metal piece right here. Okay, this is our catch, which is going to catch our shell carrier that wants to go up and down. Okay, it's got your little button over here on the side that releases it. For those of you that own these, you know when it's gun is back, you push the button, it lets the bolt go forward. Okay, you also can't load a shell until you push the button to release it so that you can push the shell carrier up. Okay, that's because this little latch right here is the piece that grabs a hold of that shell carrier and keeps it from going up. Alright, we have two other little handy dandy deals over here. Get the camera a little better. That's your primary, secondary shell, to let the shell come out of the tube basically. It's not really a primary and secondary, it's two in this one. It only has one. There's two levers, but it only does one job. A lot of other shotguns, the one will catch the shell as it comes out a little bit, and then the other one will release it onto the shell carrier. The matching pieces we have to that is on the barrel. We've got this handy dandy little zigzag piece right here. Okay, this is very important to look at that and make sure it's not beat to death, totally worn out. That causes you issues. The other is the other slide piece over here. Okay, these both work, those two little arms, and we're going to see that in just one second. So if we get this together, we'll start with this side. It's kind of hard to do up in the air. So as they come back, you can see that one go underneath. Okay? And that's going to block this from coming in. As the barrel comes forward, it's going to release that, and it's going to let this spring-loaded button come in. Okay? That's going to let your shell carrier come up into the chamber, or lift your shell up ready for battery. Okay? As that comes forward, your bolt's going to follow. It's going to come stuff that shell up in there. Your carrier is going to flip over and come to the down position. And you heard that snap before. That's the override on that. So when it comes back, all it does is it comes on that side. That's the only reason you need that bottom piece. Okay, when it comes forward, it pushes both of them and lets your shell come out. Okay, on the way back, all it does is just give it rides underneath of it. So it does nothing. Got a dummy shell here, empty. So we shove that up in the tube. When we come back and override that click, it doesn't do anything. As we come up and we chamber the round that we're going to fire, we flip over that, and out comes our shell. It's going to fall out onto the shell carrier. The other thing that shell's going to do, you see on the other side our little button we talked about earlier, that is going to hit that little button and let that bolt go. Okay? Now you got to remember this is backwards. So right now, we came all the way back, we ejected our other shell, hopefully. So we came all the way back. This shell's still up in the tube. We're going to come forward. Our shell carrier is still down. It wants to come up badly. Okay, it's got all the pressure of the bolt back here, and we're going to go through that in a minute, trying to get the bolt to follow this barrel. But the bolt's not. It's held back here. Okay, as we come forward, we're going to eject the spent case off the face of the bolt. When it comes all the way up to battery, roll this over, we're going to let that go. Our shell's going to come out. It's going to hit this little latch. When it hits that little latch, it's going to let our shell carrier come up. When our shell carrier comes up, we're going to let our bolt loose, and our bolt's going to come forward. Okay? Hopefully that all made sense to you. We're going to put it together a little bit without the forward spring here so that I can work it, and we'll see that a little better. Okay, so right now I'm going to take a break. I'm going to put some pieces in here, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we put our trigger guard in, or our trigger in there, so we can see this shell plate. One of the common things with this is this little button. Okay, if you don't have good tension on your button, right now you can't push that up. Okay, push your button, it'll come up, and we're going to see that little piece I was talking about right here. Okay, this little edge right here, get close. This little edge right here is what holds this shell carrier down. So when it flips down, it's stuck. Okay, I'm going to show you in a minute the other half of the trigger group that holds our bolt back, because when this is down, it holds our bolt back when our barrel comes forward. Okay, it does that until our other shell gets shoved out of the tube and hits this little button and does what your finger does. Okay, it pushes it back out of the way so that this can go up. It pushes it out of the way and lets go of our bolt. This comes up, our bolt strips the round and chambers it. Okay, I'm going to try and later and give you a little bit of diagnostic. It's really kind of hard because it's all timing and so many things going on. But while while this is here, your failure to eject, this is very important. You're going to shoot one round and see what this gun does, and then you're going to put one in the tube and shoot another round and see what the gun does. If this catch is not holding this in place, it's going to let it override, and it's going to come up and hit the bottom of the shell that's trying to get ejected. Okay? It's going to spit your shell out of the tube, and when you're done, you're going to have a semi or fully ejected shell, an empty chamber, and that thump that you felt on your foot was the shell coming out that came below the carrier instead of above the carrier. Okay? So if you shoot one and your second round is at your feet, we're going to start looking at this button, and just pop this out real quick. We're going to look at this edge up in here. Sorry for the lighting, but you'll see it when you have your gun. We're going to look at this edge right here, and we're going to look at this little edge right here. Okay, you can see from the marks and the scoring on it and how it's kind of rounded on the top. You might need to sharpen this edge because it's going to eventually get peened over rounder and rounder and rounder. Okay, so when it tries to hold that, it's going to ride over top of it. Okay. The other half of how this works, we have our bolt, we have our locking lug. Okay, our locking lug comes up and locks, as it kind of states. When it's together, the locking lug, sorry about that, holds our barrel together. Okay, now this one will come apart because we're working backwards. Once that locking lug's up in there, it's holding the barrel, but it's holding the barrel together when we're up here, not back here. Okay, so on normal, this would have to release to let your bolt come back because your barrel never moves. But this, the Franchi, they all work. This comes back as a unit. Okay, so the whole thing slides back, and then they have to separate. So as your trigger's holding this piece, which this little notch right here is what we're talking about, that's hooked to our bolt handle. That's why when you pull the handle back on a closed bolt, the handle comes back and lets you do what you want to do. Get 1 second here. See the handle come back? Handle comes back, your locking lug disappears. Okay? So when this is closed in battery and you grab that handle and you pull that handle back, what you're doing is separating the locking lug from the barrel, which lets the bolt come back and lets the barrel sit forward because the spring's holding it that way. Okay? How all that happens and why this shell carrier and latch is so important, let me put that down. It is not this piece. It is this piece. Okay? I get so many of these that people have ground and filed and done all this on the edge of this. This does absolutely nothing but override. Okay? This is the part, and I'll get real close on this if I can. You can see the side of it's peened out. You can see the wear marks on it. 90% of the wear is coming this way, not this way. Alright? And what's going to happen when your bolt comes back, it's going to override and it's going to push this piece back against your trigger. Like that. This is the tension on our shell carrier. And I'll cover this real quick while I got it in my hand and it's close to the camera. This is just a pivoting system. Okay, there's a little spring here. It goes over center and it drops. Okay, it should have tension down and up. Okay, if this gets bent or your spring breaks or one of these pins is loose or whatever, you won't have that. It won't want, when you push this, you want it to snap just like that, nice and hard. You can see our piece in the back here is going up and down. It's going to ride this little 45-degree track. Okay, so when our barrel comes back, our shell carrier is down, right? Because we went into battery. See how it lifts that up? That comes up, and I'll show you the notch in a second, and holds your bolt back while your barrel goes forward. Okay? So as long as this shell carrier is down, and this little notch right here is stuck against that piece on your button, this is not going to go up. It can't. It's locked. And as long as this is locked down, This is going to be really hard because I got 5 springs and everything to contend with. This piece is going to be sitting in that notch right there, holding your bolt back. Okay? Now the piece that it's holding is what? It's our charge handle. Okay? So, when everything comes back and stops, the carrier latch is down. That little tongue is up in here. Okay? Our spring is trying to push our bolt forward. So, this gets locked back. The bolt goes forward because we got spring tension pushing on this. So we're holding that. We push the bolt forward. Ta-da. If I can get it to go. That's one of the problems with this gun, is the locking lug. It unlocks. The barrel goes forward. It strips our shell, which I'll show you in a minute when I put everything in here and we can look at it close. Comes all the way forward. When our barrel locks into the battery position, it toggles those 2 little feet. We shove a shell back onto the shell carrier, which pushes our button. When our shell carrier can come up, okay, we're going to push that. Our shell carrier is going to come up. When it does, it's going to ride down. When it does, it's going to let go of this little latch, and it's going to let our whole bolt go forward, chamber that round, and we're ready to fire. Okay, so that's in a nutshell how all this goes. Alright, I'm going to take another break. I'm going to put this in the gun and put the spring in the back of it so we have tension on this, and we'll go through a little bit more. But basically, that's what keeps this from riding forward with the barrel and never separating, and we're going to get into that as part of the diagnostics.